Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of Future Leader Sessions. I'm super excited to be able to join you with some fantastic panelists to be talking about leading across cultural boundaries. I'm just going to let everybody settle in, get your cup of tea, get your cup of coffee. We're going to just take a couple of minutes while everybody joins us. We've got people joining us live in the Zoom room. So if you're joining us in the Zoom room, welcome, welcome, welcome. Really excited to have you here. And we also have people joining us on LinkedIn. So if you're joining us from LinkedIn, welcome. And we're super excited to have you here, ready to listen in and to participate on this really exciting topic, which is leading across cultural boundaries. As you can see on the screen, we have some really esteemed leaders in this space who are all leading and have led across cultural boundaries. And they're going to be sharing with us their experiences, their learnings. Don't forget, the beauty about future leader sessions is that you, the audience, have the chance to ask your questions as well to our panelists. So not only are we going to be talking about the general themes, we are going to be diving in and answering your specific questions that you are going to be asking. And I'll tell you more about how to do that in a second. I'm going to just jump into some really basic housekeeping while we wait for everybody to join our Zoom room and get settled in on LinkedIn. So the first thing I want to just remind you, if this is the first time, I mean, this is the 9th episode, so hopefully you've seen one of them before, but if this is your first time, just to let you know, we're running this on Zoom and LinkedIn Live at the same time. We are going to be using Slido as the single point of where everything's going to come together. So in a second, I'm going to show you a QR code, which I'm going to ask you to scan, that will take you to Slido, which is going to be where you can ask questions, you can upvote other people's questions, and you can also interact with our polls. If you are having any tech issues and you are in the Zoom room, you can message in the chat, and our lovely marketing director, Jessica, is on hand to help you with any technical issues. If you are on LinkedIn live watching and experience some tech issues, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help you. But if you scroll on the LinkedIn page of the event, you should also see a link to be able to join into this Zoom room. So if you have any issues there, you should be able to still join into the Zoom room from LinkedIn. Is it going to be recorded is a question that loads of people ask. And the answer is yes. It's going to be available on Elemed's website. And because this is session 9, there are 8 other sessions for you to go in and have a watch whenever you want. So we're building a really rich content library for everybody that wants to move forward into leadership. We've started on time and we will end on time. So please try and join us all the way until the end to get maximum value from the session. And please do give us your feedback. Keep an eye on your inbox for our follow-up email to ask you what you thought about the session and what we can be doing better, as continuous improvement is a big part of how we operate as well. So get your phones at the ready, guys. You're going to see in any second this big QR code that's come up on your screen. If you scan this QR code, it is going to take you on your phone to Slido, which is where we're going to be asking questions and running a poll. If you are in the Zoom room right now, there will also be a link to the Slido if you prefer to operate on your browser and you don't use your phone. You should be receiving any moment now a link to the Slido for you to open in your web browser as well. We're not going to be monitoring questions from anywhere else except for what's coming into Slido, guys. So make sure you have that open and you are ready to give it a go. Now, this is a good opportunity, actually, while we're there, to actually let's run a test and make sure Slido is working. So I have a question for you all, which you should see popping up on your Slido screens. And it's asking, where are you joining from? So let us know, where are you joining from? We're running the topic leading across cultural boundaries. I'm interested to know, do we have a global audience right now? So let's see what people are saying. Where are you joining us from? What have we got? Oh, wow. So we've got Canada, we've got Oxfordshire, we've got Germany, Kent, Brazil. Really exotic. Sheffield, okay. France, Belgium, the Netherlands. Well, we've got Zurich. We've got people literally from all over. Poland, I see you. UK, I see you. Rocklaw. Who else have we got? We've got Germany. A lot of people from Germany, it seems like. Brazil, Canada, really good. The Netherlands, we've got a lot of people joining us from all over the world. So we are definitely talking to the right audience. So without further ado, I think we should actually get into it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. And I'm going to bring up and spotlight our esteemed panel. So I'm going to ask for everybody to briefly introduce themselves as well. And then we're going to get into asking some questions around the theme of leading across cultural boundaries. So, Rebecca, I'm going to start with you. Could you briefly introduce yourself for our audience?
Absolutely. Rebecca Sheridan. I'm the Vice President for Regulatory and Quality at Oxford Endovascular, based in Oxford. I've been working within the area of medical devices and regulatory affairs for 30 years. And I started as a regulator at the MHRA and then for 15 years worked in global organizations, predominantly American companies, in the areas of regulatory quality and clinicals in increasing levels of seniority. And then around 13 years ago, I seemed to be doing a lot of advocating for startups and SMEs. So I took the step into that space and have been working primarily with high risk innovative devices in the startup space across Germany and the UK.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So let's go next to Itoro.
Hello, everyone. I'm Itoro Udofia. I'm the director for MHS, which is a notified body, TÜV SÜD. I'm based in the UK. TÜV SÜD, as you may know, is a German organization. I've been in the regulatory space and in notified bodies for 16 years now, and worked for a British notified body, an American company, and now German. And I've had different roles again in increasing seniority progression throughout those organizations. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you very much, Itoro. And finally, let's go over to Nicola.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicola Zaccheddu. I work at Philips as head of quality in an organization called Innovation Engineering. So I'm responsible for the quality management system, quality assurance, and quality engineering, and all the other aspects of compliance for that group. I've been in the MedTech industry for about 11 years. I started actually in R&D and then later moved into quality, different roles in different organizations. And I had the blessing of dealing and leading multicultural teams across Europe, Asia, and America. I'm very glad to be here and looking forward for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for introducing yourselves. For everybody joining us a little bit late, I'm just going to quickly bring up this really important QR code, which is going to give you access to Slido. So the way that this session is going to run is we're going to talk around a few of these key points with our panel, and then we're going to go into live Q&A. So what you'll see when you scan this QR code, there are already some pre-registered questions. On those pre-registered questions, you can upvote the questions you really like the look of, that you want us to address. When we come to do the pre-registered questions, I'm going to be addressing them in order of popularity. So if there's a question on there that you really want to make sure gets asked to the panel, give it a thumbs up so we can start there. If you have a question that's not there, please add your question as well. So this is your opportunity to make sure we're asking the right questions to our panel, everything to do with leading across cultural boundaries. So I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to get started. So in terms of when it comes to leading across cultural boundaries, what would you say are the transversal skills that you need in order to succeed as a global leader? I'm going to start with you, Rebecca.
So there are two, for me, there's two main transversal skills, and communication, which no surprise that that's for me the number one. But it's the communication, both the spoken, the written, your body language and how you present yourself, and the listening and receiving that feedback. Those are the things for me which are critical from a communication perspective. The other thing is being versatile and adapting to the situation, the scenario that you're in, and responding to that with sensitivity and not being judgmental. And that for me, those are the two key things.
So I'm going to just follow up on that. So let's say, obviously, so transversal skills, we're talking here. These are skills that are like not technical skills, you know, as you've highlighted here. But let's say somebody is starting their leadership journey, and they're sort of saying, "Hey, I want to then develop those skills." How do people go about doing that?
So what I found really beneficial earlier in my career was I would watch other leaders and leaders who I respected and admired, and I would observe how they interacted. And I was really lucky that in my first job outside of the MHRA was with a company called Guidon, and I got to be in meetings with competent authorities with some very, very senior leaders. And they, of course, very different cultures, but just how they always gave space. They didn't rush. And when you speak, you give space and allow the response and then allow time for clarification. And that for me allows people to, particularly, I mean, one of my English being my native language, it's a massive privilege in the global business environment. So many people we interact with, English could be their second, third, or fourth language. You need to give people an opportunity for that to sink in when you're speaking in a language which is not their native language. Give them the space, give them the time. And I just found that observation and looking and learning from leaders who were established and who I admired really informed me. And I have thanked, people subsequently for the learning that they gave me, because it certainly set me on the road to success.
So observing is sort of like a key strategy then, observing other leaders.
Yes.
And what about, I'm also curious, what about if you're virtual, right? So what about if you're starting your leadership journey? And I mean, we're talking about leading across cultural boundaries. So very common nowadays that people will have teams and leaders in different countries. So how do you get that exposure when you are not physically, able to like physically go and shadow someone?
So this is also where my age is going to be highlighted. My first in Guidance again, we didn't have really the internet as we do now. We were still faxing. We were using telephones and calling people in to do a conference call. So this is absolutely an incredible environment to be able to interact with. So I really love the fact that we can have virtual now. But in those olden days where there are colleagues that I had a very good, close relationship with in different parts of the world who I have never met, even now, 25 years later. But we still interact as former colleagues, friends. And so you need to spend the time to speak one-on-one with people, and not just about the work. You ask about them, their lives, their family, their interests, and you find commonality. So that's the personal side of things. And you always follow up when you always ask and check in and follow up on those personal things. But the other thing as well, when you can't see people, and I think this is a really good discipline that has informed how to run meetings in a virtual situation and also physical meetings. You have to make sure you go and ask every single person who's on that call, because no one can see everyone. Is there anything you would like to ask? Is there anything you'd like to add? Or I know that this is a subject which you are interested in and we haven't heard from you yet. Would you like to contribute? And so it's just having that discipline of going around and ensuring that everybody has had the opportunity to speak, that they also have the space. Again, it may not be their first language. Give them some grace to be able to communicate and ask clarifying questions to ensure that their point, that they have understood, but also you have understood their perspective as well.
And
Yeah.
taking your advice, Rebecca, Itoro and Nicola, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think yeah, Rebecca's absolutely right, and I think all of these points. I think so. Early on in my career as well, I did a lot of observation, but for me, it was the opposite. I observed what not to do because you know you can see at times where things are bad or how you wouldn't like to be treated, and so you can learn from that. Sometimes you have a negative there's a negative effect on you, and you don't want that. You don't want to carry that on, and so that's another way, of course, to learn. With you learn from observation, but certainly if there are people that you admire, or if there are people that you like, or they're the styles that you like, you see how they come across, how open they are in particular, go and, take every opportunity that you can to not just associate yourself with them, but to tag along to different events and meetings and so on with them, just so you can learn and absorb what's going on. Yeah.
Thanks, Itoro. Nicola, I think you had something to add as well, didn't you?
Well, I just echo
Okay.
everything that was just said, because I think the most important thing is your willingness to learn and really observe and listen to others, both leaders and peers, to understand how you would like to become and behave and how you wouldn't like to. So it's really about setting your mindset in a learning mode all the time, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say, Itoro and Nicola, do you have anything to add in terms of the transversal skills to be successful as a leader of teams across cultural boundaries?
No, so like I said, I think that's the biggest skill, your ability to actually be flexible, and communication, like Rebecca just said, is also key to me. Communication is really a reflection of the relationship that you're able to build with someone, right? So you communicate better with people that you actually have an understanding of how they think, how they interpret things, and how they live certain situations, right? So you need to put a lot of effort, I think, if you want to be a good leader, to get out of your comfort zone there and really understand that sometimes things that you think they are right, they're not always absolutely right. Right? So
Yeah, and if I can add to that as well. So for me, I've grown up in different countries and I've lived in different countries, and one of the things that I learned is sort of immersion and trying. You have to try to understand and learn about the individuals, the different people, the place that you're in, whether it's even just learning one word in a language or anything like that. It's, or trying foods, saying people's names correctly, learning how to pronounce their names properly, right? And not telling them exactly how they should be pronouncing their names. That's happened to me where my name is not a difficult name to pronounce, but someone just like, no, you should be pronouncing your name like this. I'm like, oh, hang on a second. So it's about, you've got to do your best, try to immerse yourself, getting to know the place you're in, the people that you're working with, and so on. Yeah.
And you make a really good point about names, by the way, because a leader that I very much respect told me that when you get someone's name wrong, it's like they really feel it, and people get my name wrong all the time, but the second time and the third time after you've corrected them, that's where, like, it's the little things, isn't it? That as leaders we need to be sensitive to, but the name is a really important thing. It's a really important place to start, and if somebody has a name that's difficult to pronounce, actually asking how would you how can I pronounce it? And then trying actually goes a really, really long way. So really, really good point there. The next question that I have here is, what are the three big lessons that you guys have learned from personal experience when it comes to leading across cultural boundaries? Nicholas, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So one big lesson that I think is very important is you have to be careful with generalizations and stereotypes. So unfortunately, there are many around, and you have to really, if you really want to become a good leader, you have to refrain from just blindly believe those, but instead, like we just said, learn, inform yourself, and actually understand that even within the same cultures, there is so much variety of behaviors. And so you can never assume how someone will behave or will interact with you just based on where they come from. So that's one big lesson for me. The other one is, I feel like we already just mentioned also, is that communication is really the key here. Maybe to add to this point, communication, we talked about how we as leaders should communicate to or adapt our communication style to a bit match what our team members need. But to me as a leader, is also important to also foster in the team the same behavior, so that they also learn how to interact with me as a leader and what I need from my background and how I interpret things. So I feel like it goes both ways, and you can help your team growing by actually helping them understand the same thing that we just said. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry.
That was you asked for three, right? So I have a third one
Yeah.
too. So another big thing I've learned is that if you want to remove regional or cultural boundaries, it takes really sacrifices. I mean, removing silos, right? So I have been in a situation, for example, where I was leading a team, and this team was distributed across different regions. And when I joined, there were really silos of, for example, the team in China was working very well within that group, and then the team in India was working very well with each other, but there was no strong collaboration across the different regions. So we had to make a lot of sacrifices to break those silos. For example, rather than having, meetings at different time zones to accommodate that, I will really insist that we will have a single town hall where everybody's going to make sacrifices, but we will be all together and talk together as a team. Or, for example, working on common goals. So year goals we have at Philips, the year cycle where we assign goals to team members, and instead of having individual goals, I will team up people from different regions on the same goal, so they will work throughout the year together to achieve that goal. Or even mixing up in projects. If you have a project running, for example, in China, maybe a good idea to assign a team member that is not located there, but maybe is in India, right? It gets a bit more uncomfortable, of course, from some perspective, like time zones. However, if your goal is really to break silos, I think those sacrifices can be really worth. And eventually, we did see a lot of benefits from those things.
So actually kind of like actively going out there to try to break these silos and bring people closer together and creating more commonality.
Right.
I was curious as well to ask, you spoke about facilitating kind of communication flow and making sure that like everybody sort of came together on the same page. And I wanted to know, what does that actually look like? Is that a conversation where you say, hey, this is what I'm about, this is what you can expect from me, or is it just people learn by doing, or you say, because different leaders do that in different ways?
Yeah, so the best way I've been seeing it done, actually. So I had this leader at a certain point, and he put his new team together, and we had this meeting where this new leader started talking about himself. Like, I like this, I don't like that, I get upset about this. And I have to be honest, at the very beginning, I was like, what's going on? Why is this guy now talking about himself all the time? And by mid meeting, I actually realized, actually this is brilliant. By first meeting with him, I already knew, what he likes, what he doesn't like, a little bit how to interact with him, what makes him angry, what makes him happy. So actually, I found that eventually to be very insightful and helped us a lot as a team to actually get to know him. So that to me was a very good example. I think I'll do it. I'll do it myself next time that I'm in that situation.
Yeah. There's this team playbook type activity that some leaders do, where you almost have like each person in your team can kind of draw that up, and it's almost like a communication playbook. I mean, we all speak about how important communication is, but actually, like sitting down with people and say, how do you want me to communicate things to you? Like what actually works, what doesn't work, can be a really powerful tool. Rebecca, I'm going to go over to you because you're nodding your head, which means you've got something to add as well.
Well, the whole thing about not assuming, because I have a mantra that if people who work with me know inside out about never assume, always inspect. And that was something, although I'm in regulatory and quality, in my at Guidant as a very senior sales marketing executive said, you will want to come to me for advice. And when you come, I don't want you ever to say the word assume. If you the word assume is going to come out your mouth, go out and go and inspect. So never assume, always inspect. So obviously being a regulatory quality professional, that's really positive because that really helps us get to where we need to be. But conversely, when you're talking about people, everybody has a very different life experience, cultural background. So what may resonate with you in one way, it may not be received and understood in the same way. So never assume that you may have said something that it's landed the way you want, that you thought it would. So always check and always inspect. And by doing that, you start to learn more about the other person or the other group or the team, their needs as well. And then you can improve your communication style to ensure that things are landing better the first time. So that for me has been a really positive lesson. The other thing is smiling.
Okay.
Smiling in any culture, any language is the same. And that for me, if you smile, it makes a huge difference to how you are perceived and and it makes people feel safer and more receptive. So that's what I'd like to add.
A really good point, right? It's like the global communication that brings everything together. I'd like to ask though, how do you inspect when it comes to actual like the communication side of things? Because it's not like, you can audit and then you're like ticking off a checklist, right? So how can you actually inspect that that's something you have said has landed how you intended it to, for example?
So you ask for clarification and just say, so you ask, what do you think about that? And just simple clarifying questions. And how would you take that? How would you implement that? And just see it's not it's practical questions to check clarification.
I really like that. Thank you for the for the tips there. Itoro, have you got anything to add? Biggest learnings?
I think most of them have really come out, but I think one of the key ones that sort of resonates with me is that on inclusion, is that it's really someone coming in, whether they're new to a team or they're established, but if they're a minority or something else like that, and you're excluding them from a discussion, a meeting, you don't bring them into a conversation, right? You're further alienating, those individuals. So it's absolutely really crucial to bring people in, make them feel like they're part of the team or a part of the organization. And I think that's one place where we fail a lot, whether as leaders or as organizations, when we exclude people for whatever reasons. It could be because of whatever bias, whatever we think, whatever we assume about those individuals, or those people, but without really checking or understanding or inspecting what they actually meant with something or the other that was said. So so it's important that we include people. Yeah.
So we're going to come on to stereotypes and bias in just a sec, but I'm going to do a quick break to share the QR code to all of our lovely attendees. So if you joined a little bit late and you missed my intro at the beginning, please scan this QR code. It's going to take you to Slido, and in about 10 minutes, we're going to jump into live Q&A. When we go into the live Q&A, we're going to prioritize questions that have been asked by you, the audience. I'm going to be prioritizing those questions, but ranked by the most popular ones first. So if you scan that QR code and go across to Slido, you will see that there are already some questions there posted by Anonymous that you can thumbs up the ones that you like. And if there's some on there that you want us to ask but haven't actually been put into Slido, you can add your own questions. So this is going to be the place where in about 10 minutes time, we're going to be looking into Slido to be answering as many of these questions as we can in our quick fire round. So I'm going to stop sharing to continue back on the discussion. So we said that we were going to touch on, okay, well, how do you overcome stereotypes and bias in multicultural leadership? But I do also want to make the point of, on the one hand, you want to overcome stereotypes, but on the other hand, do you have any advice for people that are leading across different cultures for the first time? Like, have you had learnings that with certain cultures, here is some things that you need to be mindful of versus not? Or is it really everybody is on an individual basis that you need to make sure you establish? I'm gonna, Rebecca's smiling. I'm gonna go to you for the smile.
Well, one of the things I really have valued quite a lot of times is that in my working environment, people say, well, you sound very British, but you really aren't, which I always take as a compliment that I obviously have a British accent. I speak English as my first language, but how I'm perceived when I'm working with people is that I don't take that into the conversations. And so I do think that you should not stereotype. And I had a very good lesson about that, where I'd worked for an American organization and I'd worked with Americans primarily from 4 different states. I then went to work for another American organization from a very different state, and the business culture was different, but how I needed to interact with my new colleagues was very, very different. And I found, because I talk about processes very much, if I'm not very, I don't really, that's how I found from the previous company, we spoke about processes, and when we spoke about feedback and so on, we would talk about processes. And I found with this new organization, people were taking me talking about processes very, very personally.
Okay.
And I had to, which was a shock because I wasn't expecting that. And so I had to obviously take a step back and ask some questions, and understand why this was something which they were very sensitive about, and it was only about processes. And it was just a very different, they were American, but they weren't the American of the 4 states I had been working with before. And it was a very good lesson for me. And if you're from the north of England, you're different to the south of England. If you're from the north of Germany, you're different. You speak different dialects and so on. So I do think it has to be tailored to people, so that you learn to work with the person and with their teams as well. No stereotypes.
Itoro, I'm going to take this to you because, of course, you gave the example of you're working for a German organization. but you're UK focused. What's been your experience and what's your advice when it comes to stereotyping?
Uh, it's so one of the things I would say it doesn't pay to stereotype people. It doesn't help. Because again, you walk into a situation with a certain bias, and sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's unconscious, but you don't, if you go into those situations, you sometimes already have whether it's a set response, a set mindset, a set reaction. And what happens is it holds you back from listening to what's being said, or it holds you back from being open to other possibilities other than your own or what you expect based on your assumptions. And so because of that, we need, again, as leaders, you have to be open, be flexible, be open to various possibilities. Your opinion, your assumptions aren't the only one, because the same way you have an assumption on someone, they're having the same back at you. And so you may also want to dispel some of that as well. So for me, it's always more about being open. But we also have to look within ourselves as well, because within all of us, we have some level of bias. And I always get suspicious of people who say, I have none. If anyone's saying that, just run away from that person, right? So we all do, but it's looking within ourselves, addressing, acknowledging that, but being open to learn more, being open to look at another, if you like, point of view. If you are if you go into a different country, for instance, and for example, I think when I've gone into situations where you're an expat, you're regarded as an expat, you go into another developing country, and you're seen as the expert in everything, and you feel and you believe that you know more than everyone else. And so because of that, if you have someone local coming to you with an option, coming to you with, I want to do this, I want to, drive down this, road or something like that. Like, hang on a second, that's not quite a good idea, because such and such could happen to you. Like, well, you have no idea what you're talking about. You ignore those people. They come to you with, and you do that at your own peril, essentially. So it's always important to listen and add, and take in what's being said from others. Just don't have this, either whether it's a superior attitude. So even as a leader, you think, oh well, I'm the boss, and so I know everything. And no, we have people that work for us that actually probably know even a lot more than we do. So let's lean on that. It's our job to help shape them, so we can apply the same thing to these sort of cultural situations as well, as we bring people on board. We want to learn from them, because they bring in other experiences that we may never have, and so it's good to learn from that. So if we're open to learning from others, it's amazing what we can do. Not only do you bring them on board the team, but you are also valued, if as a leader as well. So being open, having that empathy, listening, having again, and if you have situations where there is some level of conflict as well, whether it's cultural or otherwise. Creating the sort of environment where people feel safe, that they can talk about those things, that they can be open to, they're open to speaking about those sort of issues and resolving them. Because sometimes when they come out, we can talk about it, we can understand where people are coming from, and then we can move forward. Yeah.
And you make a very valid point as well, because culture is very closely linked to people's identities as well.
Yeah.
And actually being open and saying, hey, teach me about your culture, like teach me, like show me. I once spoke to a leader who, she was leading a big global organization, and it was like, whenever I went out to the region, it would be like, show me what to do show me tell me about your culture, let's go and eat local food, and, tell me more about your personal life, and try to get to know people in that way. And that allows you to connect with people at a deeper level as well, rather than kind of like superficially and at kind of in a corporate way.
Yeah.
And it allows you to build that connection. Nicola, what about you? What have been your learnings?
Well, I really like what Itoro just said about, all of us, we all have some bias, and whoever says that is not true, they're just either lying or they're just not aware themselves. So I think a very good thing to do is self-reflect and try to identify, okay, what are the biases and, the stereotypes in my mind, and really trying to acknowledge them for yourself so that you can be careful and watch out and take actions that you don't unintentionally use them, right? And then Elena, to do what you just said, I really love, for example, when I travel, for example, to India for work, one of the part of the travel that I love the most is we typically have a dinner with team members there, and we talk a lot about culture, and I am genuinely interested there, and I really love to hear, what they tell me and how they live certain parts of life. For example, it's very different from my experience as Italian, of course. So it's fascinating, but it's also driven by a genuine interest. So I think a very important part of all this, you need to have a real interest in this thing. You can't just fake it because you want to show that you care, right? You really need to care. And that's part, of course, it may be difficult if you don't have it in you, right? You have to really work on that, because people can tell if you are just trying to appear interested or you are really interested in what they're saying and where they come from and their culture.
Very valid point. Very valid point. So I'm going to just do a quick pause, because in just a couple of minutes, we're going to go into the live Q&A. So to all of our attendees, if you aren't already on Slido, scan this QR code, open up Slido, have a look at some of those pre-registered questions, give a thumbs up to the ones that you like, and we're going to be addressing them in just a couple of minutes, in order of most popular first. So make sure you've got your Slido ready. And if there's questions that are not in the list that you really want us to make sure that we're asking, I'm going to get through as many of those as I can. So feel free to add as many questions as you want, and also let the other attendees upvote them. You might have some really, really good questions to put to the panelists as well. But before we go there, the question that I have for you all is, what advice do you have on how to develop a global mindset? How do you go about developing a global mindset? And that's a question that I have for all of you. So who wants to start?
Well, if I can, I think it's probably along the themes of what I've been saying before. Is for me, just being curious, being open, right? And just be open to different opportunities, be flexible, be willing to adapt, and you need to be able to adapt to whatever situation that you're being put into. So yeah, that's one really key thing for me.
So be open is Itoro's one. Rebecca, what do you have?
So it's again wanting to learn, and again, be curious. That's again the word I would use. And I mean, I just enjoy the opportunity to learn, that is just the key. I mean, what an opportunity if you have the, to learn more about this amazing globe. It's wonderful.
So enjoy the journey. Yes, really nice. And Nicola, from you?
Yeah, for me, two things. One is study, so inform yourself. There is plenty of good material that you can actually use to educate yourself on many of those things, right? On top of course, personal experience. And the other thing is really whenever you can, meet people face to face. So travel if you can and meet people in the different offices if possible, right? Rather than just relying on remote calls and meetings.
So actively put yourself out there as well. Really nice. Just a quick question on studying, because you said study and there's loads of resources. Have you got anything that comes to mind in terms of where people can go for more kind of practical learning?
Yeah, so actually, at the beginning of when I first got a team, I almost by coincidence, I actually encountered a very good book, which is called The Culture Map.
Okay.
Is a fantastic book, and it talks about how people from different cultures interact in business context. It's full of examples, is very detailed, and to me that was a very good thing to start with. Um, and to the point that I actually bought a copy for every one of my team members at that time. So I would recommend that book to anyone.
Very nice. Thank you. So some recommended reading as well for everybody to go away, do some homework. Right, so now we're going to jump into the questions, and we do have quite a lot of questions here, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out the question. We're going to start with the most popular question and work backwards. The question is also going to appear in the chat, so you can see. So if you're joining us on Zoom, you're going to be able to read the question in chat. But if you've got your Slido open, you kind of know what's coming anyway, because I'm going to be going top down. And then to our panelists, if this is a question that you can answer, please just say I can answer that, and then say your piece. If you've got something to add, then please also add on to what one of the other panelists has said. So, are we ready? We're going to go quick fire and try and get through as many of these as we can now. So, the first question is, can you share a situation where cultural misunderstandings arose and how did you address them? So can you share a situation where cultural misunderstandings arose and how did you address them? So really asking for concrete example where cultural misunderstandings have arose and how you actually went about handling them. Has anyone got anything?
So I'll answer from my perspective. It's more of a team approach, but when I first joined a company in a senior leadership position, there was an attitude that one of the regions was being difficult and not wanting to work with the registrations that needed to be done. And I was told, so I was by my seniors, you have to go over there and sort them out. And I was relatively new, and I'm thinking, it's not my style for number one, to go and sort people out. And actually, I didn't think that was the right solution because, as Itoro was saying, it wasn't me that was the one who was working with the documentation to support the submissions. It was people in one of my teams. So if I wanted to address this and ensure that we had something sustainable, so we learned, we improved processes, and we had something sustainable for the future that we could build upon, it wasn't me flying over there to sort things out that was going to make a difference. It was ensuring that the manager of the team and the appropriate specialist, they were empowered to go and work with their peers and to have that detailed work to ensure that if document X is document X, oh no, it's not actually, and figure out those details build the relationships, because they were the ones who were interacting on a daily, weekly basis, not me, not their leadership, not that other leadership. And they came back. Obviously, the feedback from both sides was really, really positive. And then we started to have significant success at getting our products approved. And we were then able, my team were then able to train all the other legal manufacturing entities within the organization to improve their processes. And strangely enough, we're having significant successes, and the right people were empowered.
And what was actually the cultural misunderstanding then in that case?
It was actually communication, and it was things were being lost in translation, and we were not, everybody was talking at cross purposes, and that's the cultural conflict.
It's to your point earlier as well. It's like so often you might say something and you think it's landed a certain way, but what you say isn't necessarily how somebody else understands it. And then when you're doing that across multiple people, multiple teams, that everybody's looking at things with their own personal filters, you know, their own life experiences and their own understanding, that's where you can create these types of situations, and just bringing people together and allowing them space, as you said earlier on, to be able to address that and come up with a solution can be really, really empowering. Thank you for putting yourself on the line with a tangible example. Has anyone else got an example they want to throw in there?
Yeah, I just want to add to that, and again, it's still along the lines of communication, and when sometimes, you know, it's there are different types of cultures and different types of styles, where some people are, everything's top down, no one ever questions anything, no one ever says anything, the boss, everything goes from top down. There's some other more egalitarian, did I say that correctly? Organizations. So from my experience, one of the issues we've had, is where we've had a situation where, you've got a strong management team where I say something, it has to be done. You can't question it. But when, you're dealing with another team, so I had a team where I've tried to empower my people. You ask questions because I've said previously, you are an expert in this field. And so since you're the expert here, I listen to you. You tell me what's up, and I listen to you. So they're empowered to speak up. But when they encounter others in other from other countries or other cultures, they speak up because that's the culture here, and not quite, sometimes maybe it doesn't come up well or sensitively, but it disrupts the other side, and they think, well, you guys are being extremely difficult, you guys are being disruptive, or one thing or the other, and so we can't work with you, we can't work in that environment, because they're not used to being challenged, or they're not used to having questions being raised. It's not trying to be disrespectful, it's trying to show, well, there's another point of view here, there's another way to do this thing, so you could try something else. So yeah, it's things like that, and so sometimes, if you can be there as a barrier to maybe interpret what's going on between the two, teach your team how to be sensitive to what's going on elsewhere. So try and moderate your approach, and maybe explain. Sometimes if you're going to say no, say no because, or no but, or no and, or whatever it is. And so things like that, just trying to be open, and also explaining as well to the others, if they come complaining to you, what the situation is, that these guys are not trying to be disruptive, and so on.
Yeah. So just being clear, and again, it comes back to communication, as we've said, and as we so often say in these Future Leader series, so much of it always comes down to communication, no matter what the theme. Nicola, have you got an example, or should we move to the next question?
Yeah, I think my example is a bit also connected to the next question. I was a bit laughing at the beginning because the first thing that came to mind in my experience is one time at the very beginning, I traveled to another region, and I met this team member who I was working with for very long, and I never met face to face. And she and I had a very good relationship, work relationship, right? So when I saw her face to face, the first thing, which is a very normal thing in Italy, right? I went there and hugged her, and like, and I could tell the moment I was doing that she froze, like wasn't comfortable, and like, what's going on? And then later I realized, I didn't know at that time, that actually my behavior in that case, like, hugging her in a situation where there were other colleagues, especially, being from me, a man, and she, a woman, wasn't something very common in that culture. And so I unintentionally put her in, of course, in an uncomfortable situation. So when I realized that, of course, I apologize and I recognize, look, I didn't know. So I guess my message is, we are imperfect human beings, and as much as we try to respect all norms, sometimes we just make mistakes unintentionally, and the only thing you can do in those cases is just, recognize it and apologize, and the other person most of the time will understand, and nothing happened. And so it was a learning for me, and yeah, I think it was also a misunderstanding, of course.
It's a good point, and a mistake that's so easily made as well. So going on to that next question then, so just to elaborate, so the question is, what steps do you take to understand and respect cultural norms and traditions within a diverse team? So obviously Nicola's just given an example and spoken about what do you do when you accidentally don't realize that you've kind of overstepped one of these norms and traditions. But is there anything that you can proactively do? So let's say, I'm going to give a situation. Let's say you're leading a global organization, and for the first time you're going to a region that you've never been to before, and you have a team based there, but it's your first time going physically out to that region. What practical advice, would you offer anyone on the panel to this leader before they go out there? What can they do to learn about the cultural norms and traditions? Anyone? Rebecca.
So if there is if you're working in an organization with HR teams, one of the fantastic resources you have is to talk to the HR responsible and the HR team, for two reasons. Obviously, to understand the culture of the business as it is there, learn more about the different players who also may be interacting with your team members in different business areas, but they can also give some insight into the team itself and some of their challenges that they've maybe had with prior leadership. And that can then help inform how you communicate. I would always, obviously you don't turn up, hey, hi, out of the blue. So introduce yourself initially, with an email to give people, and then have a call with key people if there's leaders within there, and have a strategy on how you are going to be introduced to, because there's the other side of it as well. Obviously, you want to learn about that. They want to learn about you. And you have to give people the opportunity to feel like they've impressed you a little, the new boss. It goes so far in every culture. People like to feel seen and recognized, but really have a strategy and work with other people in the organization to set yourself and the team up for success, to minimize the possibility of tripping over some cultural norms to that culture, but which are not to you. Practical advice.
Yeah, especially if you're in a large organization and you've got those partners available as well, that's a good point. So let's move on to the next question then. So moving on, the next question we have is, what techniques do you use to understand how to communicate effectively across different cultures? So obviously coming back to the topic of communication, but what techniques do you use to understand how to communicate effectively across different cultures? Has anyone got any practical tips that they can add, that they can offer here?
For me, speak quietly. Slowly. Speak slowly, because I
Yeah,
have a tendency to speak too quickly.
it's a good point. It's a really, really good point, actually slowing it down. And it also changes how you're perceived when you speak slower as well versus when you speak really, really fast, interestingly. Nicola, I think you had something to add as well.
Yeah, so for example, depending on who you're talking to, you want to make a conscious choice if you have to be more directive or less directive. So especially if you want to generate ideas, right? If you want to have a meeting for people to come up with something, depending on the culture of the people in the room, if you step in the meeting and say, and you're the leader, that's my assumption. Hey, this is my idea. What do you guys think? You may have only half of the room actually speaking up because maybe you're putting other people, depending where they come from, in a situation where they feel uncomfortable with disagreeing with their boss. I see this. I live in the Netherlands, and I have to say, Dutch people are typically, and again, without generalizing too much, very egalitarian in how they behave, and so they like to brainstorm, and they have no issues if I come up with an idea to actually challenge it and have a good brainstorming session. However, when I work with my team, for example, more in Asia, that's not always the case. So we may want to take different approach, and rather than sharing my idea first, right, I maybe don't even join the meeting, and I ask the team to be together, come up with some proposals, and then I join later and we discuss together, right? So I refrain from actually share what my preference is.
That's a really good tip, actually. Not even being there and not saying anything, but actually not even being there at
Yeah.
all to facilitate that free flow of communication. So, and then you going afterwards to see actually what the outcome was.
Yeah.
Really, really nice advice. Okay, let's move on to the next question because we do have quite a lot to get through. How can I build a better relationship and be a better manager to teams working on different continents and time zones? So how can I build a better relationship and be a better manager to teams working on different continents and time zones?
Yeah, I think we're on this theme of communication, I think. Yeah, we can't all be together in the same place at the same time all the time. So it is important, again, coming back to one of my initial points on inclusion, that everyone feels included. So we have to strike a good balance between having, so if, as a team, at times, yes, you need to have regular team meetings, to share updates and so on. But perhaps start considering having those team meetings at different times that accommodate each time zone. So rotate the timings of the meetings so that at least every time somebody or will be inconvenienced. So that's shared across the board, really. But then also, if you like, mixing that up as well. So different people in the teams, so again, as Nicola was saying earlier, sometimes some people will not speak up in a team meeting. So maybe you want to get their perspective separately or privately. So talk to them separately in a different meeting. But there's one other thing that has worked quite well with me, which, in my team, I do this a lot where it doesn't matter whenever the team meetings happen, but I always have a different person cheering it every time. And so this way it's not only it's teaching people different skills, but also making sure and everyone's included in at least running the team, if you like, for a time, at least once every other week or month, or how often you have the meetings. So I've always found that sort of works. So depending on, again, whatever time zones, you rotate the chair and someone being the scribe, or you rotate the location or the time zones, and so on, and then following up with one-to-ones as well.
And to add to that, I would say recognize the sacrifices that they are doing to be there. Being located in Europe, I typically am in that time zone that is in between and the most comfortable one. And then who needs to make the sacrifices typically are people in the US, people in China, right? And recognizing those sacrifices, like someone is joining the meeting at 6 a.m. or 9 p.m, right? It's a very important thing. It is appreciated, of course, by them. But also, I remember a situation where some team member came to me and like, yeah, we have these meetings and we are engaged, but that person is never engaged, never speaks up. We are there in the conversation and she's always silent. I mean, guys, for you it's 12. You just had you're almost going for lunch, you had your coffee. That person is 5:30 in the morning, She probably has still her pajama there and the kids are still sleeping and she's still in the meeting and she's listening in, she's doing her part, and you can't expect the same type of interaction that you have at 12, right? So it's good to share this thing with the team, because with that, they also realize, oh, that's true, right? So they appreciate also the effort that each other is doing as part of the team, and you also foster a better collaboration and communication between them, right? So being attentive to those things and recognizing them, I think, is extremely important.
Really nice advice. Thank you, guys. Let's keep going then. So next question. In a high stakes setting, what tips would you recommend to differentiate what belongs to culture and what belongs to political positioning? Okay, so I'm going to read that one again. In a high stakes setting, what tips would you recommend to differentiate what belongs to culture and what belongs to political positioning?
So
you want to take that, Nicola?
I'll give it a try. So I don't know about the political part, but I want to say that you have to be careful not to classify everything as culture difference. I think sometimes culture can also be used as an excuse to actually cover underperformance or actually just bad behaviors. And I think that's the part that is very difficult, because you need to really be able to differentiate that. So I can give an example, and it's nothing to do with political, but I had a very very bad conversation with one person one time, and this person was just being rude, really rude, like plain, like there was no, and so I went and I gave feedback to the person later and to his manager, and the manager just was like, yeah, but we are Dutch, so no, that is not cannot be the reason, right? The fact that you are Dutch does not mean you are unpolite or you are rude, right? So let's not use culture as an excuse for behaviors that are just not acceptable, right? So you have to be careful to distinguish those things, because sometimes they can get mixed up and you don't want that. So I guess it takes experience a bit, common sense, and also, just trying to draw a line between what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, regardless of where you come from. you know.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I think that this example, I think clearly quite points to the question actually. I don't think it means like politics, but more office politics. People playing games in order to perhaps get an upper hand or whatever. Rebecca, you were kind of nodding your head, so have you got something to add to that? It's a good question.
I think it's an excellent question. Um, one of, and I think this is where leaders also can work together. So, I had a situation where I went into an organization and my functional area was really badly perceived, not just by other leaders, but by all their organization. And it was a different, I was living and working in a culture that I'd not lived and worked in before. So I was I was not in the UK. And in fact, I I worked very, very hard establishing positive relationship with all of the different leaders so that if I saw a behavior, I could go and clarify from a member of their team with one of my team, I could go and clarify. But I also did ask, because, we need to turn this around because my functional area is not wicked and nasty, it's critical to business. But I actually asked them to support me. I needed their help for us to be a success. And so that practically for me was building really strong relationships with the cross-functional team leaders, not just in my functional area, to help me better understand. Well, I have someone to go to clarify where if there was behaviors that I wasn't sure about because I was in a different culture myself.
Very nice. Yeah, and actually going and building those strong relationships to facilitate and also setting expectations, right? Like being really clear upfront from the beginning around what is acceptable, what are the expectations, and then when you start to see people going against those expectations, then you can always, bring them back to, these are the expectations of the business or how we communicate as a team. So
Yeah.
it's not a cultural difference. Actually, like to what Nicola was saying, it's about bringing people back to the expectations of how the team should behave together as well, and common sense. Right, we've got loads of questions coming through. Itoro, have you got something to add to this one?
I have something. I haven't formulated it properly in my head, but one of the things that I see, to me, I think it's an important question. And to me, I look at it as almost trying to establishing power in the situation. So to me, this is just about it's just a bit about that. What's the power dynamic? And sometimes you try and use one, it could be due to political reasons, office politics, or cultural reasons. So I think one way to try and address this is really trying to understand that in that organization or in that situation, we're part of the same team. And I think hopefully we have the same goals, we have the same vision, we're trying to achieve the same results. And we should, relax a little bit on that, because we either use office politics to slam someone, or we use the cultural question to hit someone with it. But we are trying to get to the same destination. So how can we come together to do that? Let's put some of these things aside because it's not necessary, right? Those differences, those political or cultural differences that we have are there to enhance us, to help us get to where we need to be, rather than hold us back. And it shouldn't be one person or the other. We're trying to get to someplace together. So, yeah.
Very well stated. I'll take that. It's about driving people in the same direction and focusing on the commonalities in the end rather than the differences. So there is a really nice question here. How do you ensure cultural sensitivity while making leadership decisions? I'm just going to ask for one person to answer this one so that we can move through some of the other questions because I'm conscious of time. So the question is, how can you ensure cultural sensitivity while making leadership decisions?
Well,
Nicola?
I think, like we said before, right? By being aware, educating yourself, understanding the cultural aspects of the other person, and making conscious decisions based on that, right? I mean, that's the only way. You only can act consciously when you have educated yourself enough and uh, you understand the other person's background.
Mm-hmm. And I'm actually going to skip past the next question because I think it's very well aligned to some of the things and the themes that we've already kind of addressed around bridging cultural differences and communication and decision making. We do have a question which is around how do you give feedback to employees in an intercultural environment? Do you adapt the way you give feedback to each person? I think this is an interesting question. I'd be interested for your perspectives on that. So in an intercultural environment, do you adapt the way you give feedback to each person based on culture or not?
For
It's all
me,
right?
I'll say, yeah. For me, I'll say yes, because in this case, I actually don't even think culture. I think individual and person.
Yeah.
Everyone's different, and as I give feedback to everyone or people within my team, I do it in a different way each time. So yes, I would I would adapt and change the way I give that feedback.
Would anyone not adapt the way that they give feedback based on the individual?
No,
Yeah,
fully
so
aligned.
the consensus is adapt the way you give
Yeah.
feedback based on the individual, not specifically the culture of the person, but actually that particular individual. Another really interesting question, guys. So you can all participate on this one. How do you lead multi-generational teams? What advice do you have for leading multi-generational teams? It's really interesting when we talk about the millennials,
Um,
the Gen Zs, the Gen Ys, and all the differences that these generations bring. So, Rebecca, over to you.
So this really makes me laugh, this question in a really positive, and I mean it in a nice way. Having been a leader for over a quarter of a century, I started as a leader when I was relatively young in my career, and I'm now hurtling towards the other end of my career. So I've had the situation where I've had people in my team who have been significantly older um, than I, and therefore experienced. And obviously now it's the other way around where I'm having people who are much younger in my teams and less experienced, but with all that fantastic youthful exuberance, which I recognize from myself in the older days. So I my there are three things that I always that I think have stayed with me from the beginning. Number one is, so what are the needs? What are the needs of the person in that role to perform the job that they do today? Because that's a job that needs doing. Then, so understand that of the role, but also of the individual and the ecosystem that they're working in. Number two, and what does that team member within the team need to support the organization's objectives? And then what are the specific either career or requirements of that person, where they are in the career right there and then, and where do they aspire to go? And of course, and it doesn't matter if you're a millennial, Gen Z, by understanding those three elements, you then get a good picture of the need of that person, but you build it up of the team. But when you've got a multi-generational team, it's actually rather marvelous because you've got a really wonderful opportunity for sharing of experiences, information. You've got people who are coming in and they don't necessarily have a lot of experience, but sometimes the questions they ask, because they're not bringing all this experience with them, can be very, very insightful and create some innovation within processes or the way that you're approaching the company's objectives. So I actually think those are the three key questions that I go into and have served me well. And it's never the same. And you learn so much also about where you may be in the future, but also I'm learning that's where I was in the past, and it's lovely to see.
It's very enriching, as you said, like multi-generational teams, and there's a lot of ability to kind of like cross collaborate and cross share. And people talk a lot about mentoring, but reverse mentoring is really a thing as well, and the multi-generational teams also allow for that. Does anyone have any other advice around leading multi-generational teams?
So I think yeah, partly being open to learn. I was speaking with my wife the other day, and this was about the sort of feedback that we used to get. I used to have this anatomy professor who got the joy of insulting everyone. All the students, he would ask you a question, and if you stumbled or you didn't answer correctly, he would berate you in front of the entire class. But that was that generational thing. Everyone was kind of used to that. But one of the things I've learned with, I've never adopted that style anyways, but one of the things I learned with feedback, I learned a lot more from the younger generations because, giving feedback is important. It's absolutely important with your team, and how you give good quality feedback has actually come from, I would say, some of the younger generations. Some the older ones are fine, more experienced. They're used to this sort of abuse that we get. But as they got younger, you needed to bring them in more, to encourage people. Praise more, do things like that. So it's good to important for me learn and understand how important it is. How you give feedback across the different generations, can be, and it improved the way I, if you like, communicate with my team, because that wasn't just useful for them; it was useful for the others as well. Because when I started giving feedback that way to an older generation, they're like, "Ooh, thank you. I didn't think you thought like that, and I never gotten any kind of feedback like this before."
And what specifically did you change, Itoro, when it came to delivering feedback? Because people always have questions around what's the best way to go about delivering feedback. So any advice that you have there?
Just be honest, be truthful, but don't. Yeah, just be honest to with the individual. If you mean it, don't just say, "Oh, you're fantastic." Everyone says that. Give an example. If give an example. I think you were absolutely brilliant when you did this, and this is why. You know what? I was on a call with a colleague like a month ago or something like that, and I was listening. They just brought me on the call for moral support, essentially. So the client was unhappy with the situation, and then they spoke to the customer. They explained the situation. It was supposed to be a really confrontational conflict situation, but it was handled very well. And at the end of it, the call was finished. I could go on and carry on with my day and my meeting. I called this person up and I gave them feedback. This is what I thought about your meeting and how you handled it. When you said this, when you did this, when you did that, that was fantastic. Well done on that, and the way you dealt with and you handled the client. And that was effectively it. And they appreciated the fact that I recognized those attributes and those things in them.
I had an English teacher that when we were coming up to do our GCSEs, which are the exams that you do kind of at the end of school when you're like 16, she drummed into us that it's very important that you pee all over your exam paper. And that's literally what she would say, P-E-E, all over your exam paper when English literature. And that was an acronym for Point, Evidence, Explain. And it's something that I learned at the age of 15, but it served really, really well. Even, you know, when you're going into an interview, it's something we teach our candidates. You make your point, you give your example, and then you explain it. And it's actually something as well that you can apply to what you were saying as well there, Itoro. It sprung to mind because it's basically P when you're giving feedback. Okay, we're literally down into the last few minutes of the session. So I'm going to do one more question, which is, how do you measure the success of your leadership in a multicultural environment? So I just want to put that to all of you. How do you measure the success of your leadership in a multicultural environment? Does anybody have any advice on that?
So I have my personal definition of being a successful leader. It's really personal to me. To me, you're a successful leader when you have brought your team to the point where they don't actually need you anymore, in the sense that they are leaders themselves, basically. They're leading themselves and each other. But regardless, they still want you as a leader. To me, if you're a leader that, you know, when you go on holiday, everything stops, or nobody knows how to do anything and problems starts coming up, you're not being an effective leader. You're a good leader if you are able to go away and your team has it under control anyways, and, you know, nothing happens. And despite that, your team still wants you as a leader. What I mean is you have built something with them, and they don't want you as a leader because they need you as a leader, but because you have built that safe environment and good culture in the team that you work well together. So that's my personal definition of being a successful leader. And I think it goes regardless of multicultural environment. I think it's in general.
Rebecca?
So my approach is slightly different. One, you're achieving your business goals. Two, the team, the members of your team are well integrated within their project or business teams, and the feedback that you receive from these their partners is positive regarding both their engagement and their contribution and performance within that team. That within the time that you're spending on conflict resolution is very small in comparison to maybe where it's been. And this is the one thing that I really value, is that your direct reports and their team or extended team members, they will reach out to you to have potentially difficult conversations because you have created a safe environment for them to do so. And as a leader, I take that really fills me with pride for not just myself, but my organization when we've got to that point. And because it means that we are a really positive support network, but we're performing well within the business too. That really, for me, is how I measure success.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Itoro, final closing words from you.
Yeah, I think I have to steal what Nicola said, because I absolutely subscribe to that. It's all about empowerment, ensuring you've got this independent team that they can succeed without you. And I was trying to remember the words. So there's one of these writers, Simon Sinek, one of the things he said, it's more about the people, looking after the people in your charge. And once you've empowered them and they're okay to work and be on their own, to me, that is success.
Thank you very, very much, everybody. And guys, we're into the last minute of the session, and I promise that we will finish on time. So I'm going to quickly jump onto sharing my screen. For those of you that are in Slido, you should be having a poll appearing in your Slido. I'd like to know, what is your biggest learning from today's session? Let's see what people. So smiling is universal. I really, really liked that point that you made earlier on. So I'm interested, everybody, for you to share your biggest learnings in the Slido. We've also got P there as well. What else do we have coming through? And whilst that's going on as well, I'll keep my eye on the Slido. But in the meantime, I'd like to know if you're going to be attending the next session of Future Leaders. That is going to be session 10. We're going to keep doing these, guys, because we've had such amazing feedback. Will you be attending the next session? I'm interested to know how many people answer. So we've got lots of yeses. I can only see yeses on my screen right now, which is 100% conversion, which is really, really good. Really pleased that you all got value out of this session. Also, just to let you know that Elemed has released our newest salary report. So here's the QR code to access that. You'll also find it on our website. And recordings of all other Future Leader sessions available to watch on demand. If you haven't seen the other 8 episodes, please go ahead and see them. And the next save the date is the 6th of March. And we are going to be talking about the hot topic of mastering communication. So we're going to go deep into everything that is communication. Save the date, the 6th of March. I want to say a huge thank you to today's panelists. You were all fantastic, and I've learned so much. I'm sure our audience has learned so much being on this episode. And I wish you all an amazing rest of your evening, rest of your day, rest of your morning, wherever you've joined us in the world, and see you on the 6th of March for the next session of Future Leaders. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.